Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to take a look at some basic first steps in Dorico. So the big conversation lately has been all about moving from Finale to Dorico or Finale to wherever. But I want to take a look at some first steps within Dorico. These are some things that I wish I knew when I started. And these are some really basic things that you can kind of use to help your entry into Dorico. And we're not going to look at super advanced things, but kind of just getting around the interface. And I've shown some other tips and tricks, including pairing with TouchOSC in a different video. So if you're at that level, I highly encourage you to try that. And I think a great place to start and to think about is, if you have questions, join the community first. Unlike how kind of we learned about software way back when, like when I joined Finale 2005, we were doing a lot reading an actual manual, but nowadays there's so many other ways to interact with people. And really this could be very helpful if you're not in a major metropolitan place and you need access to kind of answers to these questions. You know, there's a lot of bad things about social media, but there's a lot of great things about the connectivity that we have nowadays. So join the Discord server for composers and sound designers, check out the Steinberg forums, and you can also find all sorts of other active groups on Facebook and other social media platforms for composers, arrangers, and orchestrators. So we're just going to look at a few starter ideas, but let's jump into a brand new file in Dorico. So here we are. We have a brand new file, and we're going to make just a single player instrument. Let's type in piano and we'll start here. This is one of the things that I know confuses people, and honestly confused me at first. Just starting with this type of setup is just a little strange. And I understand the purpose is to kind of give you the freedom to start wherever you want. If you want to just start composing in 8/4 or whatever, it's doable. But it's not exactly where we all start. For example, for me, I'm often starting with a sketch of ideas that I did on pen and paper, or something that was done with MIDI in a DAW, and now I'm bringing that into notation software. So I'm not always starting from here, but if you are, it may be helpful to start with your key and your time signature. So let's just go ahead and get out of setup, which is where we would add any instruments, and we're going to go into write mode here. Now, the kind of classic old way of doing things, we could just select our starting point here, this rest, and we could go over here to the side panel. We could add in a time signature. We could add in a key. We could also do it from a popover. In Dorico, popovers are going to be some of the main ways you add in anything, and it's going to be important to learn. There is a full list of all of the popovers on the Dorico forums and website. I actually keep a list in my TouchOSC template, and I have a button that shows me all of the different popovers within Dorico. And that's helpful because sometimes it'll be a couple months between working in Dorico because I'm doing something within a DAW. So we could add our time signature over here, or we could hit Shift plus M, and I get this popover. And I'm going to go ahead and add in 4/4. And there we go. Now we're in 4/4. And it's going to be the same if, you know, let's say we want a key signature. We're currently in C, but let's just go ahead and Shift K. And now we have the popover for simple key signatures. And we're going to go ahead and do D. And now we're in D major. Now, if we wanted to go to D minor, we could just go Shift K and do a lowercase d. And now we're in D minor. So check out those other popovers that I was talking about, but let's put in some notes. So I'm just going to double click in here, and you can see we have this grid resolution, or these grid lines here. And we also have the caret showing where we are. If I hit my arrow keys left or right, you know, we're moving around. Right now, I'm going to be inputting whatever is up here. That's quarter note. And our grid resolution is set down here. So if I wanted to see 16th notes, click that, and you can see I'm seeing 16th notes. Now, I talked about the number pad solution that I use, where I change them to be the Finale defaults, where 5 is a quarter note, 4 is an eighth note, and kind of so on and so forth from there. If you need help doing that, check out one of my previous videos, which shows you how to do that. But one of the things that I think is a really important setup in Dorico, which I disagree with some of their current keybinds is setting your grid resolution. Now, working within the grid is really important. You're going to need this for a lot of things, and being able to change quickly between them is really important. Right now, you could hit Alt and then hit one of the left bracket. It'll be a bigger grid. You could hit the right and it'll be shorter time, or more notes within the grid. Now, this is really helpful, but sometimes I just want to move quickly in between them. Here on Dorico's forums, you can see the keyboard. This is the base setup for the keyboard with all the keybinds. Now, some of the function keys, and I've talked about function keys in previous Finale videos, but to me, function keys are super important, right? F1 through F12. They're up top, they're easy to get through, right? When you're working fast and you need to just hit a button and you need to kind of feel where it is, the F keys, that's really what they're for. Now, Dorico has some built-in keybinds for those, which I don't find useful really at all. I have no need to pull up the transport or the mixer while I'm composing. That, I could easily do with a click of a button, but how I'm using Dorico to compose, getting the mixer, that fast while I'm working, it's just not necessary. So for me, what I decided to do, and I know this is changing the default keybinds, but if working within that kind of grid resolution is something that you're going to be doing a lot of, I recommend setting something like this up. Now, I also have TouchOSC, where I can see each grid, from whole note all the way to 32nd note, and I can move in TouchOSC to control that. But we could also set that up with the function buttons. And this is going to be similar to what I showed in previous videos. We're going to go to Edit, and we're going to go to Preferences. And now here in Key Commands, I want to look at Grid and Grid Input. So here we have the Rhythmic Grid Resolution, and that's this guy up here. So we're going to click this down, and here you can see I have this set up to be with F keys. So F4, which if I was hitting on my number pad 4, that would be an 8th note. So this changes to an 8th note. If I was to do 16th notes, F3, because 3 on the number pad. 32nd notes, F2, and 8th note, F5, because 5 on the number pad. But the point of key shortcuts is to speed us up, and it's supposed to work to your specific workflow. So right, if I wanted to change these in quarter note, I would click here, I would hit F5, and then it would come up and I would add key command, and then it would enter. And then hit apply and close, and you're all set. So now, here if I was to hit F5, it's changed to quarter notes. If I hit F3, 16th notes. In my number pad, if I hit 4, 8th notes, 3, 16th notes. Now I can control everything with my function keys for the rhythmic grid. And I know this isn't exactly how the developers had intended for the function keys, but for me, this is what I've found to be easy. The important thing about keybinds, especially with Dorico, is that they can be changed. So as you're working, when you find things that you're running into, change them to whatever makes your workflow better. Whether you're composing or you're, engraving, or if you're arranging, whatever you're doing, put your keybinds to be working for you. That's really something that's so amazing about Dorico that we didn't have the ability to do in something like Finale. Now I have kept F1 as my help button, so when I click that, I still get the help screen, which is very useful. There's also a really nice thing for transpose, so I've set that to F9. So let's say I have a chord here. I'm going to have quarter notes, and I'm going to go ahead and click in here. Actually, let's change the grid here to quarter notes too, so it's easier to see. We hit F5, so I have a C here. To make a chord, we're going to go over here, and now I'm going to add in this A and add in this F. Cool. So it's still turned on if I was to add in another note, and my caret is here. So if I was to type the letter E, it's going to add that in. If I was to hit G, it's going to add again. So I'm going to go ahead and exit here and turn this off. But something I've added is for transposition. So I'm going to select this chord here, just drag over that, and I'm going to hit F9, which for me, I've set to be transpose. And let's say I want to move this from where I'm at currently to move down, let's say a third. We're going to move down a third. And now it's transposed the entire key down. And I find it really useful to have this transpose key with a keybind. Okay, so let's start looking at something else here. I'm going to click, select all this, delete this. Let's select here, and we're going to go Shift K, and let's go ahead and go to C major. So let's input some notes. I'm going to double click in here. You can see I've set my grid is at quarter notes. We can also see that here, and I've got quarter notes selected. Let's just use the keyboard here. And this is not a MIDI keyboard, this is my typing keyboard. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And I'm gonna hit exit. Okay, so we have, this is selected, right? If it's orange, it's selected as my last note. But we have this great thing that comes in here. As I keep going, you know, let's go ahead and hit 4, go to eighth notes. I'm gonna go E, F, G, A, B, right? It's just gonna keep typing through until I stop and keep adding new measures. Another way you can add new measures is to use over here. This is the bars and bar lines. And we can add measures to the end of the flow. Let's hit 10 and we're gonna insert bars. Now that added them, right? Like I said, at the end of everything. Now if I wanted to add them after here, after measure 2, I'm going to select this point in measure 2, and I'm going to select this drop down, and I want to add it at the start of selection. So let's add 2 measures right here. And now you can see it added them in between where I was. Now if I'd wanted it to go after, I'd select this bar line here, and now it adds it there. Some of these things that are specific to, like, if you had the 8th note selected or the bar line selected, those can be tricky and frustrating, but as you work in Dorico, you'll get used to those and it'll be a little bit easier. And I should mention flows, right? Flows are basically movements. So you could have just one flow, and that is just one movement or one piece that you have. If you have more than one flow, you can have more than one movement, or you could have those as separate versions of the same piece. So maybe flow 1 is a version that's piano plus voice, and then you know do another version that's going to be piano and violin, and that's a second flow. You could do that, or you could have those as 2 separate pieces. You could have those, you could basically build those things in a variety of different ways, but I treat flows like movements. And speaking of flows, we have this here, and I heard from somebody that it was annoying that all this text shows up, and I get it. So here in Engrave, we're going to go down here, and we can select this by using this tool right here, the frames tool. And now we could select that, and we could delete it. Now, the frames work in Dorico, it needs to be updated. There's definitely some things that are annoying. For example, if I was to add in a text grid, I can't really align it. I have to really drag it and know my numbers. That I don't love. Working in it can be a little more difficult than I want it to be, especially when I'm used to doing design work in InDesign by Adobe. So there's definitely some work to be done in frames, but there's some great wildcards that you can use. So let's go ahead and hit right click. And now we can see project info. So let's go ahead and add composer. Now, if I exit out of this, let's go back to right. We don't see anything. If we go up to file and now project info, here's where we can add all sorts of things. This is going to be Tim's new song, and the composer is going to be me, Tim Corpus. Now this is for the entire project. We could also create a new flow here, or we could copy this information here. Let's say you have a ton of information in here. So now we could also copy info from flow 1, or if we come from flow 1 where we have no information, we can copy that information from project over here. And now it's automatically added in. We hit apply, and now you can see it's added these things here. So back in Engrave mode, if we double click in here, we can see it has Project Composer. Double click here, it also has Project Composer. So these are nice wildcards that you can add, and you don't have to type the information each time. If you were to have multiple parts, if you were to have multiple spots on the page where you want certain information, you can put a lot of that here, which is super helpful. Something that's a little unique about Dorico is how it separates between setup, write, engrave, and play mode, and of course, print. And you can see these are tabs on the top corner of Dorico. Right up here, we can select between these different regions to do different things. And that really makes sense because here you're focusing and editing the notes that you're working on. Here, we're able to deal with other things like the text that we need to change some of the frames, the wildcards. Maybe we need to change how the engraving of this is working or the layout. They're going to be at kind of different layers if you think about it that way. So this is a write layer. This is kind of your engrave layer. So something that I've heard people having issues with, which I also had an issue early on, had to do with Gradual Dynamics. So let's go ahead. We're going to select this B here. I'm going to hold Shift and now arrow to the right and to the right again. Now I've got these three notes selected, B through D. Now, if I wanted to add the dynamics, I could go over here to the dynamic panel and I could select this. Crescendo, I could go Shift D and then I could type in a crescendo, or I could have these three selected and I could just hold Shift and then the caret from small to big, and it adds in a crescendo. Super easy. Now you might be thinking, what the heck? We wanted the crescendo to go from here to here. Why is it over here? Well, this has to do with some kind of global preferences regarding hairpins. And this is important. Let's go to Library, Engraving Options. We're going to go to Dynamics. Now we're going to scroll all the way down to Gradual Dynamics, which is right here. Or you could type that in, Gradual Dynamics, and you could find, oh, where is that? That's in Dynamics. And now we're going to go all the way down here to Advanced Options. So this is where we're running into this problem. Position end of hairpin relative to note or chord. We want this on the left side. Also, hairpins are crossing, or do they start? Hairpins ending at beginning of note, at start of bar. I like them not to cross the bar. So I'm going to hit apply and close. And now we have this here. And this looks a little bit more accurate to what we want. Now we could get even more detailed with this. Let's go ahead and I'm left clicking, dragging over to select. I'm going to hit my Shift D, and now I'm going to put in P, and now I'm going to put in a crescendo to F. And now it's going to add all of that in. So like I said, the popovers are really useful, especially when putting in dynamics. You may have been using certain hotkeys for what we called expressions in Finale, where you could add in dynamics. But there's an easy way to do it here, and it's just with those popovers. So I know looking at the engraving library, that's a lot of options. And this program, Dorico, has a lot more options than Finale did. It's a different way to look at things. So you can control a lot of these global options in the libraries. So, in Finale, I would have fixed that crescendo that was going over the bar line. I would have had to use my expression tool, select that, and drag it over. Here we're going to work differently. We're going to try to solve it at a macro level. We're going to try and solve it with the libraries. And if we're still having trouble or it's still not looking exactly like we want it to, we would use a kind of micro level and use the engrave layer, as I'm calling it, or the engraving tool when we're clicking in here. Now I could gather more control over this, but I don't recommend fixing this this way. Fix it in the library. And the last thing I want to talk about here, which I didn't show yet, is this bottom guy. You have more options down here. So if we were to select this A here and you wanted it to be a bracket, you could do it that way. You can do all sorts of options, and these options can be local or global, as I've shown before. And this panel also exists in engrave mode with even more options. So these are just a few things to get you started in Dorico. There's obviously a lot more that we could talk about. But as you're just getting started and you're playing, keep in mind popovers. Keep in mind making your main changes in your libraries. And if you can't figure it out there, then start moving individual objects. And also think about, as you're going through and you're running into trouble, work with your hotkeys. And the grid line, that's really important. You're going to use the grid line for everything. When you're placing dynamics, where the caret is at, that's where they're going to be placed. So make sure you're selecting or using the grid line appropriately, which is why, again, I have my number pad that's going to control the kind of length of a note or an object that I'm placing. And then I'm going to change the rhythmic resolution grid or grid resolution, whatever they want to call it, with the function keys. So hopefully this information is helpful for you as you're starting out in Dorico. And be sure to subscribe to the channel. Ask your questions below and I'll try and answer those. You can also join the memberships for the channel, where I can interact with you and you can see some of the live streams that are coming up, and we'll work through, any of your questions together. So thanks for checking out this video, and hopefully it's helpful, and I'll see you next time.